Just wait for one or two people to come and seat themselves down. Come on, Savannah. Come on, Scarlett. So, let me say welcome to Banbury St Mary's. If you've never been in this church before, it's the Town Centre Church of Banbury. Thank you ever so much for coming. It's lovely for me to see all your smiling, happy faces all here to welcome us today. Especially thank you to those who've come a bit of a distance. It's great to be able to have people who've come from Shropshire and various Nuneaton, and it's lovely to have you as well. Particular welcome to the young writers from the secondary schools I visit, to the people from North Oxfordshire Academy, and the Warrener and Wickham Park Academy. Welcome indeed. In case I haven't told you, the new book is actually dedicated to you guys. That's how much I think of you. It says inside, dedicated to the wonderfully talented young writers in the creative writing clubs we do. Hello also to those watching online. Hello, either live or later. This is all being recorded, what I'm saying from up here. So welcome to you as well. Thank you. St Mary's actually hosted us here for this afternoon, completely free of charge, which was very kind of them. Sarah Bourne, Reverend Sarah Bourne, our chaplain for the arts, and a wave at the back, and the refreshments team. Thank you very much for looking after us. Please drink tea, coffee, soft drinks, eat those cakes and biscuits, and have you all seen this celebration cake? I'm not sure if did you all see this as you came in? Isn't that pretty amazing and impressive? I love it. Leslie Southam of the Luby Loo Cake Company did that. My first job is to cut this, because it's a cake and we need to eat it. Therefore, I need to do an official ceremonial cutting of the cake. So I've got, seems such a shame to have to cut it, but here we go, my special knife. Anyone want to take a picture of cutting the cake? This is the sort of thing you take a picture of, isn't it? Like at weddings and stuff. So I've got a sort of pose with the cake there for thing. Okay. Oh, flash, 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 all this battery of cameras going off. Thank you. I suppose I'm supposed to say something as well, aren't I? I hereby declare Cave of Immortality duly officially launched. Yay! So there we go. The knife is in the cake. Would anyone take that away? Yeah, are you all right with that? If you get your hat, I suppose, behind it. So that's all going to be cut away. And please do grab a bit of that afterwards. A couple of other things. St Mary's as a town centre church does really need our support. If any of you are able to, please do make a donation. They have a way of making a cash box just to the left of the doors as you go out, or there is a contactless card reader on the right. And many of you have found that bit is not to be confused with this bit, which is the buying of books, where we've got our own cash and card reader. I would stress you don't need to buy books. Most of you have already, but I'm not here primarily to sell books. It may sound a rather strange thing to say, but this is to celebrate the release of a new story out into the world, which is a wonderful thing to be able to do. If any of you would rather read them on Kindle, I ought to mention that they are on ebook for only £2.99. Should I have told you that before you all bought your paperbacks and your hardbacks? But anyway, and the bookmarks, the postcards are free. Please do help yourselves, and I'll happily sign those. A special thank you today to a few people who read the book for me at proof stage, which was really helpful. So thank you to Ray and Fran and Sheila and Jamie and Philip and Edmund and Daisy and Ellie and Savannah and Heidi. Yeah, give them a round of applause. Well done to all of them. Thank you. Because their feedback their feedback helped me get the finished version even better, so thank you. Of those, can I just embarrass Ellie for one moment, because it is actually her birthday today. What a great thing to do as a birthday treat, to come to a book launch. Well done, Ellie, happy birthday. But a big thank you also to my family, to Anne and Mark and Rachel, who are very long-suffering of me being grumpy and moody and impatient and frustrated and all the rest of it. And they put up with me so well and are constantly encouraging and supporting. So thank you very much indeed to them. Let me tell you about Cave of Immortality. I had the first idea for it 13 years ago, December 2010, in a dream. Meanwhile, I finished and published those 3 other books, came back to this one in the summer of 2019 and completed a first draft. This story needed that thinking time because the story changed and developed over those years. The main themes of the book are those cheerful subjects of aging and mortality and death. Yay! I actually realized I needed to age, mature myself before I was ready to write and finish this story. But don't worry, the story also includes a bit more positive things like living forever and immortality and eternal youth. So it is a fantasy story set in an imaginary medieval world, because that's what I love. But I have to accept that not everyone loves fantasy as I do. I mean, how can anyone not love fantasy? But anyway, I thought I might tell you just briefly today about something called the suspension of disbelief. Now, don't worry if you don't know what that means, because I'm just about to explain it. Suppose that we all go off to the cinema and watch a movie. We sit there, all of us in a room, knowing that what we're watching up on the screen is just light projected there from some projector at the back. And the music and the sound effects have all been recorded and played for us. The actors on the screen are just playing their parts, speaking their lines, pretending to be the characters in the story. These same actors will play someone else next week. That's if they're not computer generated completely in the first place. So the point is, we shouldn't actually believe any of it. We should be sat there saying, logically, rationally, this isn't real. It's all made up. It's all staged for us. They're just pretending. But we don't, do we? For that length of the movie, it's called We Suspend Our Disbelief and allow ourselves to be entertained. We laugh at the funny bits, we cry at the sad bits, we jump and scream at the scary bits, we cheer when it all turns right at the end. We enjoy the story, we go with the flow, we share in that adventure and enjoy the ride. It's called the suspension of disbelief. Accepting for a while what we know to be made up, just to see and discover where that journey takes us. And that principle is the same with TV dramas, with theatre plays, and with fiction novels. We know that these are just words on a page made up by an author, but these can conjure up for us the people, the places, the stories, the dilemmas that engage our hearts and our minds. So, whether you actually love fantasy already or not, may I invite you this afternoon to suspend your disbelief, to go with the flow, share the adventure, enjoy the ride, to open your minds and your hearts to new possibilities of imagination and creativity and awe and wonder, to magic and beauty, to the supernatural, to the spiritual, to the fantastic, to enter an imaginary world of secret powers and magic potions, of warlocks and dragons and spirit lords, to hold on to that wonderful ability of children to play Let's Pretend. Is that okay? Will you come with me for a bit this afternoon? In which case, I'd like to introduce you to someone. I was so thrilled when I managed to arrange a special guest appearance for this afternoon. Now, don't get too excited. All right. Now, a few of you have read the story and might know who this is. This is called, he is Stanley, all right? And he may look to you like an ordinary polished wooden coat stand, but for those of you who haven't read the book yet, watch out for him as you read, and he might come along. See, Stanley is not just an ordinary coat stand. He is, in fact, an enchanted coat stand. He can hear and understand everything we say. He can also move. He can scuttle around on his feet. He can bend in the middle, use his hooks, and so on. But I have to tell you, he is a bit shy around lots of people. So our deal for today is that he can remain still if he wishes. Okay? So today, this afternoon, he will be pretending to be an ordinary coat stand, all right? But do please keep an eye on him in case you see him move, won't you? You'll tell me if it's... Just remember, suspension of disbelief, yeah? Got it? So back to the story. The premise of the story is this. What if you had the ability to make people younger again, to reverse the aging process, to turn back our natural life cycle, to rejuvenate the elderly so that they could be young people again? If we think about it, if using that power, then no one need die of old age ever again. And how would that change everything? For those of you still at school, that may not sound like a very big deal. But trust me, for those of us with grey hairs, it is a big deal. The point is that if you or I had such an ability to make people younger again, and we were the only one in the world with that power, wouldn't everyone want it? They would all want access to us because the promise of practical immortality that offers. I'd like to show you the cover on the screen. Here we go, if you look up there. The front, that's the front cover. Amazing artwork by James Hayball from Brighton. The cover design was also, all the lettering was put in by Liz Carter from Shropshire. Sadly, neither of those could make it here this afternoon to come here. But for the online recording, do you like the cover? Can we give them a big round of applause for that? Well done. Thank you for the cover. Next, Steve, can we have the next slide with the full cover? Okay, so this shows the front, the spine, and the back, the whole picture, with the blurb on the back, which I'll read. Tagline, what price for eternal youth? 17-year-old Rosa doesn't know she has a secret power. When an ancient warlock kidnaps her to use her body parts in a potion he is brewing, he discovers her unique and powerful gift. But revealing her ability would plunge the whole Sapien Empire into civil war to possess and control it. Rosa's valley is threatened with destruction, and if her power is the only way to save it, how can she keep it secret? So that's the whole cover, and if we can go on to the next slide, please, Steve, because removing the lettering, you can actually see the picture better. This artwork that James did is the scene where most of the story takes place, the entrance to the Warlock's Cave on a plateau up in the hills above the town of Albany. And as well as the cave itself, there's the waterfall and the stream, a grassy meadow, an orchard of trees in front of the surrounding mountains in the distance. Recognize that, Stanley? Yeah? You recognize that? This is where Stanley comes from. You got? I thought you would. Yeah. Okay. I love how James has drawn this because it shows what a beautiful place it is. But a book cover needs to be more than just the pretty picture, but to say something about that story in the book. So as I said, the story is about immortality, living forever, eternal life, but also aging and mortality and death. So I asked James if he could include a skull in the rocky outcrop of the cave entrance. I don't know whether you can see that. If you see the cave mouth as like a sort of gaping mouth, then up above it towards the top right corner, you might be able to see it better on the banner or the book covers. Above it are 2 eye sockets and then some vertical slits for the nose bones. It's like the skull looks out of the rocky outcrop across the beautiful plateau. So the idea of that is to show the reality in life of both beauty and death, beauty and death together. And that kindness and cruelty, magic and horror, friendship and betrayal, trust and bitterness can often occur side by side, all mixed up, finding each other in surprising and unexpected places. Isn't that right, Stanley? Yes, he agrees. So, without further ado, I'm going to read you the first chapter, if that's all right, okay? The first chapter is about 10 minutes long, so just to prepare you, that's how long it is. I've actually had some advice to tell you. For those of you reading the book for the first time, do persevere through the first few chapters. If you find the first few chapters quite difficult, then please keep going. There is a reason why they are like they are and how it all turns out. But I've been told to tell you that if you're put off by chapter 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever, please keep going, because that is how the story needs to be. But does that make sense? Okay. So let me read you the first chapter. Drink of water. If any of you would rather like sit back, relax, close your eyes, I can pretend you're all asleep. If that helps you visualize things, visualize scenes. So, Cave of Immortality by Philip S. Davis, read by the author. I like that. Chapter 1. Rosa couldn't believe her luck, or couldn't decide whether it was good or bad luck. Early autumn sunshine was warming the forest that day, so she chose a shady clearing to saw and chop the wood. She hung her cloak on a branch and worked in her tunic and trousers. The logs were dry and splitting well, and the crash of her axe echoed across the valley. Her barrow was half loaded with kindling when the corner of her eye caught a flicker of movement between the trees. She straightened, watching. Was that a deer or a bear or someone else coming through the forest? Wild beasts and bandits were rare in the valley, but not impossible, so she gripped her axe in case she needed to defend herself. She'd always been tall and strong for her age, but was conscious of being alone. And then he appeared in the form of a young man. He stepped out from behind a tree, and she could only stare. His wavy, shoulder-length hair was the auburn of copper beech leaves, and his tunic the green of grass in the sun. His arms, legs, and feet were bare, and his face, well, she'd defy any girl to resist being entranced. Her limbs locked in place, her heart and breathing stopped, and she would have been content like that forever. For one glorious moment, they gazed at each other, his eyes sparkling with the greens and yellows of a summer meadow. He smiled and must have known the devastating effect he was having on her. A yearning to be nearer him made her lurch forward. He laughed and disappeared. It wasn't that he ducked behind the tree or ran off into the forest. No, he vanished before her eyes, reverting to invisibility. Her heart hammered back into life. She stared and waited, trembling inside, hoping he'd reappear. For a while, she heard his laugh in the rustle of the leaves, but he didn't return. She began to search beyond the clearing in the direction she'd seen him vanish, but there were no footprints. It wasn't fair that he'd appeared to her for such a short time. Why couldn't he have stayed longer? When at last she had to give up on waiting for him, and resumed chopping the wood. Too often she missed the log because one eye scanned the trees for him. As daylight faded, she trundled the barrow of kindling back to her parents' cottage. Although it was the most exciting thing that had happened to her since forever, Rosa didn't mention him to her parents. They wouldn't understand, or would say she was seeing things. She decided to keep the mysterious young man in the forest as her secret. Early the next morning, she returned to the clearing, giving her parents the excuse of wanting to stock up on firewood for the winter. They had remarked that she seemed distracted, and Rosa's stomach clenched whenever she thought of him. It wasn't that he was annoyingly gorgeous, she told herself, but because she was desperate to meet an invisible, magical being again. Yes, that was why she returned. But he didn't reappear that day. The vision of him so consumed her thoughts, she came back there every day, drawn to search and wait for him. She went over in her mind what manner of being he might be, which creatures had the power to appear and disappear at will. She'd lived in this forest all her life, and although there were legends about spirits in the wood, she'd never seen anything so powerful or magical before. He needn't have revealed himself to her at all, and she wondered why he did. Was it just her good luck or bad luck that he had appeared to her? Or could he possibly be weary of his lonely existence too? In the following days, she gathered plenty of firewood for the coming months, but her only companions were rabbits, squirrels, and birds. She began to compose other excuses to give to her parents for coming here. But then, in the cooler, cloudy afternoon of the 5th day, he returned. He walked from between the trees to within only a few paces of her. She froze, forgetting to stop her mouth hanging open, her axe thudding to the ground. His tunic was darker, matching the gloom beneath the trees, and she wondered if each day he wore the colours of the forest. Perhaps his eyes also changed with his mood, for now they were the green of holly leaves with a silver speckle of starlight. He was close enough for her to see behind his shoulders the rainbow shimmer of wings, like sunlight on a soap bubble. "Is that the best you can do?" He indicated towards her axe and the wood. His voice had a teasing lilt and his mouth a twitch of playfulness. She bristled at the jibe, knowing she was skillful and strong, but her mind blanked and her voice failed her. His eyes were surveying her, from her light brown hair to her bare arms to her scuffed leather boots. She pulled in her stomach, wishing herself slimmer, as always. "What's your name, girl?" She cleared her throat to recover her power of speech. "Rosabella," she managed, with a Z, "but most people call me Rosa for short." "But you're not, are you?" he chuckled. "Short, I mean." "Oh, ha ha." Her irritation rose because she always had to endure men making fun of her height. He controlled his grin. "Well then, Rosabella with a Z, why is a girl like you out here chopping up wood? Not very ladylike, is it?" She swallowed, distracted by the closeness of his bewitching face, scarcely believing that this magical being was talking with her. But what did he mean? Everyone needed firewood, and she had to do this because of her parents, but she wasn't going to tell him that. And how dare he comment on being ladylike? Her mother's example had taught her to correct any man who presumed to tell women what they could do. "We all need to stock up on firewood for the winter," she said. "And I can do anything men can." His eyebrows rose, as though he disagreed with her, so she prepared to continue the argument, but he smiled and stepped closer instead. "I'm pleased to meet you then, Rosa," he said, and held out a hand. Was he letting her touch him? She wished she weren't so sweaty from the chopping and wiped her palm on her trousers. His arm was the tanned brown of a sapling, and when she took the offered hand, it was warm and strong. She'd have held it for longer if he had let her. I'm called by many names, he said. In your language, you can call me Kerenzi. Kerenzi, she repeated. She ought to stop staring at him, but couldn't tear her gaze away. She drew a deep breath to help her heart and brain function properly again and whispered, "What sort of being are you?" His grin broadened and he swept his arm around the surrounding trees. There are various spirits who dwell in this forest, wood nymphs and dryads in the trees, sylphs in the air and naiads in the streams, and I am their master. When your legends speak of a spirit lord, they mean me. A spirit lord, Rosa repeated. She looked around the trees and blurted out, "Is this forest full of spirits, then?" Kerenzi frowned. "Not full of them, no. But some of us live here. We rarely appear to mortals, though." "Why have you appeared to me, then?" Her curiosity had won out over feeling awestruck. The spirit lord tilted his head and started pacing around her. "When I visited the other day, I was bored, and it was a bit of fun. But then I noticed something." He stopped and regarded her. "I'm pretty good at sensing another person's spirit, and there's something different about you, something I've never seen before. I can't put my finger on it, but there's definitely something there." He pointed a friendly finger at her. "What do you mean?" Rosa demanded. "There's nothing different about me. My family has always lived in this valley, so I can't see what makes me anything special." The spirit lord was shaking his head. "No, it's not about your family. It's about you. But I can't pin down what it is." Rosa shrugged, folding her arms. But inside, she was basking in the idea that he thought her unique, special. Her good luck, then, rather than bad. Kerenzi stepped further around her to get a different view, so she straightened her back. "How old are you, girl?" She cleared her throat again. 17. Kerenzi nodded and smiled. Rosa needed to correct something. A few times now he'd called her girl, and she was determined that this spirit lord consider her as more than that. "Yes, I'm 17, she declared, "so a young woman rather than a girl." To her dismay, Kerenzi burst out laughing. He bent over, shaking with mirth, hands resting on his knees. It was glorious to see his face so joyful, but not at her expense. Rosa's cheeks burned, and she planted her hands on her hips. "What's so funny?" When at last Kerenzi wiped his eyes, he shook his head. "A young woman at only 17 years. We shall see." She glowered at him, wanting to get her own back. "How old are you then, young man? Or should I say, boy?" As soon as she said it, she knew she shouldn't address a spirit lord so. This was not some boy from the town. His eyes widened at her impudence, but he seemed content to continue the game. He gazed up at the sky, thinking or counting. When he looked back at her, his eyes had changed. A deep grey of sadness had come into them as he said, "How old am I? As you count the years, it would be tens of thousands." Her mouth fell open again. "Tens of thousands?" He looked down at the grass. "So what does that make me? A boy, a young gentleman, or a very old man?" Before she could think of a reply, a net flew through the air and caught the spirit lord from behind, enmeshing him in its ropes. Kerenzi's scream reverberated around the valley as he struggled against the tightening cords until he collapsed to the grass. Rosa tore her terrified gaze away from the stricken spirit lord, jerking her head to the left as someone crashed into the clearing. She caught a glimpse of black robes. Then fog covered her eyes, and a crushing weight threw her to the ground into the realm of forgetfulness. Thank you very much. So obviously, if you want to know what happens to Rosa and Carenzi, you have to read the book. There we go. So thank you very much indeed for coming, for listening, for supporting us authors in our little endeavour of writing stories. And I know some of you are keen writers yourselves. And all I want to say is just to encourage you, and please keep going. And it's wonderful whenever you're able to be creative and imaginative and write your stories down. And you never know where it's going to take you. So please keep eating and drinking. We have plenty of refreshments over there. There is the celebration cake, I think, has been cut up. Is that right? Yeah, so there is a piece of celebration cake for all of you. Thank you for sharing in my celebration party. Please eat, drink, and be merry. Thank you. Stanley.